Hey everybody, it's Kevin Purcell. It's Friday morning. That means it's Theotek time, and we're ready for our Theotek podcast and hangout here on Google Hangouts. This morning, we're going to, as Wes just said, we're going to cut the time in half. We're going to only go for about a half an hour today, and some of you will start celebrating if you've ever tried to listen for a whole hour. And because of that, we also cut the number of participants in half, not physically but numerically, and so right now we may get joined by Antoine Wright in just a few moments, but right now we've got myself, Kevin Purcell. I'm the pastor of High Peak Baptist Church and also a writer for multiple different sites, and then we have Wes Allen. He's a pastor and works with technology for his state denomination, American Baptist Churches of New Jersey. And as we see, Antoine has just joined us. And so we'll go first over there to Wes. How you doing this morning, buddy?
I'm doing good. I've changed my location. I have Vera Bradley backdrop. There I am. I'm a happy camper. I don't know. I don't understand the Vera Bradley thing, but I have it. We're good.
What is it?
It's like a bulletin board with little elastic straps, and you hang stuff in it.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's my spouse is happy, so I'm happy.
It looks like, well, I won't be critical. It looks like a gift wrap with a blanket.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not.
That's the definition of Vera Bradley.
Oh, okay, cool. Antoine, how are you this morning, buddy?
Not too bad. A little rough for wear. It's been a long week, a really long week, but I'm getting used to Android Lollipop, and Google's really put a lot of nice touches on it. So my phone's been doing some weird things over the last 2 days that I've found actually pretty pleasurable, which is pretty neat.
Cool. Well, we're going to jump right in so we can get the news right off the bat. One thing we want to share with you is yesterday I did a hangout with Sean Boyson of Logos Bible Software, or Faith Life is what they call it now, but he works with Logos, and I hope that you'll check that out in our YouTube channel. We might make that available as an audio podcast, but it's so visual it might not work that way, but pretty soon, by Monday morning, you'll be able to see it on Theotek.com as well. That also reminds me, Theotek's got a bit of a redesign. Let me go ahead and show that to you. I will. We redid some things, so it looks a little cleaner and more video-centric. So hopefully you'll start going over to Theotek.com, where you can find links to all of the different places you can enjoy our podcast. And if you go up here under Home, you'll find pages about each one of us. And eventually we're going to have some cool stuff under these links, Bible Tech, Church, and Worship Tech. So check that out at Theotek.com. But the podcast, the Hangout yesterday, was really great. We had a real good experience with Sean. He knows his stuff. And let me find that. Here you go. There's my.
I'm only seeing your head right now. I'm not seeing the screen. Just wanted to pause for a second.
Okay.
Is the screen being shared, or am I just off?
Let's see here. You are screen sharing. Stop. And now.
Now I have your face. Now I have your head.
Yeah, there we go. And Logos. Can you guys see that video?
Nope.
No, you're not. Okay. This is the first time I've ever tried to do this with YouTube. You're supposed to be able to watch it in the podcast, but apparently you're not able to do that. Anyway, go check that out. It's called Theotek Extra Logos 6 Demo, and it is on our YouTube website. I think some of the coolest things that he did in that was showing a lot of the searching features. He showed some of the one of the things that we have in Logos 6 is the ability. They have a lot of new data sets that they've sort of packaged together in what they call the fact book, and he spent a lot of time talking about the fact book. He demonstrated the ability to push things to your Kindle, so if you would like to read a book that you have in your Logos library, on your Kindle. You can do that real simply and easily from the library manager. So go check that out. I think that would be really helpful. Well, the first thing we want to jump on is, speaking of Logos, I spend a little time, since I use Logos regularly, in the Logos Bible Software Forum. And there was a discussion this week about some old features that were not being fixed, and yet they keep adding new features, which that's something. Every time Logos comes up with a new one, there's a whole bunch of new data sets and new features in it. And there's sort of a discussion going back and forth about, well, why don't you fix these old things? Well, they want to add new stuff that makes it more appealing, and that old stuff, hardly anybody has to deal with that. And so I actually wanted to talk to you guys about that. What do you think of that? The balance between, they need to, it's a company, it's a business, they need to sell more software to keep the doors open. But what do you think of this balance between adding new stuff and putting their development resources behind that versus fixing minor bugs that maybe it only affects 2% of the population that uses it, but still it's annoying, Wes, what do you think?
It's the feature creep is the bane of commercial software, right? We want the new whiz bang, and to me, what you just talked about, having the books being able to be sent to Kindle, I think that's really interesting. But coming from, I came back into commercial software via Linux, and there, if there's a bug that's not getting patched, you get 3 people annoyed, and they just decide they're going to do it themselves, because bugs need to be fixed. It might be a bug that's affecting the use of it, but you have no idea what other impacts this is having on. So things that are long-standing is really a bit of a pain in the neck, and no software is immune to it. People were complaining for years that the browser Firefox was a memory hog because it just kept on leaking memory all the way. Every time you opened a tab, it would just keep on sucking memory and resources from your system. Why these things don't get fixed, I don't know. But it's when people are
I just think the resource issues. Don't you think? That a lot of these Bible software companies, or church software, worship software, or church management software, or even Microsoft, they've got a limited number of developers, and so let's see, are we going to fix the one that affects 20 people or 2,000 people in the case of Microsoft, or are we going to add the feature that might sell 2,000 copies?
Yeah, and I understand that's the problem of feature creep.
Yeah.
But to me, there's a law of diminishing return on that, because the more you do, the more you institute new features, cool as they might be, if bugs aren't getting fixed, people will stop reporting them. Because they're not. Why would you bother reporting something if it's not being acknowledged and dealt with? This is the problem Apple's having right now, which we were just talking about before we went live. Is these bugs keep coming in, and Apple's just like, we'll start this new feature. I'm like, great, but can I copy and paste an image from your own browser into a Keynote? Wouldn't that be nice?
Antoine, why don't we get you in on this? What do you think? I bet you have some strong opinions.
It's not so much a strong opinion as much as it's in the software development side of the world, there are 2 ways of addressing problems. There's one method that says that you ship your product, you figure out what the bugs are, you fix those bugs, and then you go about shipping a new product, and you categorize some of those bugs as high priority, medium priority, low priority, and but your goal is for each release is to end up with what amounts to a near perfect release. And some of those low bugs, those bugs that might not be high priority, and priority is usually going to be defined by the cost to the bottom line, the cost to the users, the cost to your developers, and you kind of move on from that. And then there's another type of bug smashing where you just constantly iterate. You constantly create new features and fix bugs along the way. If you will, there's almost no such thing as a major version, because every time you fix a bug or release a feature, you're moving so fast that everything is a major version. And for church software, Bible software, it's this agile software method of constantly iterating, while a very good thing, is founded in the former model, which has a very bad acknowledgement of priorities in respect to what the user is looking for. And so if your product has focus, if you have very clear product focus, very solid product management, you fix the bugs that matter, and even some of the bugs that don't matter, just as fast, if not faster, than you build out a new product. You're agile enough to do two things at once. But what, that Logos forum was discussing, what just about every software package ends up going through, is if you're not focused on your product, then your users, your paying users, not just your stakeholders that keep your company up, but your paying users are going to end up becoming unpaying users because they do not feel that what they're paying for, they're now getting good value for. And there's a cost benefit to it. There's a point where the loud people really don't matter and you don't have to listen to them, but that can quickly turn the other direction. And for a company like Logos that has a new brand, or Faithlight, that has just changed their branding, that has a culture of not quite fixing the previous product before moving to the next product, I think it would be it would fit their software relationship with their users and the developers better if they didn't do what they used to do when they were Logos. So if they didn't fix all of the major bugs before moving to the new product, Faithlife would be a better company for fixing those bugs and kind of changing that conversation. But if they don't change their conversation, that means their product focus hasn't really changed. And to those who just deal with that company from a product level, which usually are most of their customers, they'll see that the company really hasn't changed focus and really is the same company overall.
Two things I want to say about, just to react to what you said there, Antoine. First, I don't want to paint Logos as the only one that this is an issue with. I think plenty of other ones are as well. But second of all, especially with Bible software, maybe more than most kinds of software, the reader is really just a small percentage of what you've purchased if you've bought commercial Bible software, and that is it's the books, it's the content that you really are dependent on. And so it's not so easy for me to say, let's say I've purchased a great big huge library of Logos books. I can't just say, well, you know what, I'm tired of this software, I'm going to word search. Well, that means I got to rebuy some of the same stuff. I had the Word Biblical Commentary and the New American Commentary, and I had UBS, all these other things. I got to buy them again. One of the cool things about Accordance, which we demoed last Friday, is at least Accordance says, look, we know you've already owned this in, say Quick Verse or Word Search or BibleSoft. So here's what we're going to do. You can show us that you already own it, and we've made deals with some of the software or some of the publishers, and we're going to give it to you at cost. And so they've sort of guessed how much did it cost for us to develop our copy of that book, and so we're going to let you buy it at that cost instead of having to pay again for it. And so I bought a lot of stuff in Accordance, because I could afford it, even though I already owned it elsewhere. But anyway, I think this is, it's an interesting discussion. I don't know, we're not going to solve it here. When it comes to the resources that churches have to place towards software, it can be frustrating though when you've been dealing with a real bad issue for months or even years, and they're bragging about, oh, look at this new whiz bang feature. It can it can wipe your face after you've eaten a sloppy sandwich, and you're just like, yeah, but I just want to be able to make a bookmark of that book that I've been reading. Well, we'll get that eventually.
And Kev, and you can mitigate some of the negatives of that. Hold on a second, Antoine. If you own the book, people are more forgiving in letting kind of a new feature take resources while they're saying, we know this is an issue, we're getting to it. If you ignore the bug, well, then that's where you run into problems. And what we talked about, this is Apple's problem right now. They're just ignoring everything.
There's nothing wrong with our software. It works great. Yeah, right. I can't do this. Antoine,
Kevin, you actually just pointed out, specifically for Bible software, and music software actually used to run into this as well. But Bible software is its own, every piece of Bible software is its own niche. And so there's no incentive at all for Logos to fix issues with its reader, because you cannot take Logos's content and go anywhere else. Therefore, it's a captive audience. And, for better or for worse, I totally understand the dynamics of publishing and why that's the case, and that's a whole nother show. But if Logos had the ability to lose customers because the content in Logos could easily be used in any other Bible software, the readers wouldn't break. Because you would not, the experience of using a reader is what would be tantamount to the product, not the experience of having XYZ library of content. And that specific issue is why Bible software does find itself continually adding more features, then it finds itself becoming a more polished product. And it's very easy to solve that problem. Publishers and developers simply need to make an agreement that if Bible software content works on one platform, it should work on another platform, just like what Accordance is pulling off there. If that was the case, the readers now become the product of the experience, and then the readers have to be fixed completely in every iteration so that not only the readers get their value, but the publishers don't have to wonder about licensing content across several platforms to individual users or collections of users over several device types. So it's a solvable problem, but inherent in Bible software is the reason to not fix Bible software. Content just doesn't move.
Well, I think you're. When that happens, candy won't make me fat. So that's sort of a hopeful thing out there in the future. Wes, talk to us. We're going to move on to this. Wes had this blog post he pulled out from. It seems like the Paleolithic age.
Oh my gosh, 2011.
No, officeless office. What are you talking about here? And you want to discuss this morning?
Yeah, I thought it was good. Well, it came because a couple months ago that Google added, dialing out to phone numbers right into Hangouts, and this brought up this issue again for me because I've tried this with churches. We have a tradition, which is not as old as people think, of having an office in the church that someone sits at for 4, 5, 6 hours a day, maybe 5 days a week, maybe 3 days a week, and they're there to answer the phones and get the mail and do all the things, and they receive all the information that people send out, and this is where people go to figure out what's going on at church. This is a model that just doesn't work anymore. At least especially not for smaller congregations, but in general, I don't think it does. One of the reasons is people no longer use a church office as the central hub of connectivity for a church. If they want to get in touch with someone, they're no longer leaving a message in the church office to put in someone's mailbox. They're texting their phone, or they're calling their mobile, or they're sending them an email. So that takes out a huge amount of the workload of what goes on in a church office, because they're no longer passing these notes all around. But the other thing is, the last thing people want to do is, hey, we need someone here to answer the phone. Well, that no longer really is the case, because you have things like Google Hangouts. You could get a Skype out number. You can get all these wonderful VoIP things, and you can take it with you and plug it in wherever you are, or just turn on your laptop and say, here is my church office. It's whenever my computer is turned on. And if a phone call comes in, it comes in. And some of the neater features of that is a call comes in, and whoever is functioning as the secretary, wherever they are, gets a call for the pastor, If they know it's a time where, say, I'm free, they can go, oh yeah, I'll get a hold of them right now. Click, and I'm getting in touch with this person. Instead of, the model now is call the church office and leave a message on the answering machine, and maybe I'll get it on Thursday. Which doesn't make any sense to me. It's the more, and this is Antoine's universe, right? The more mobile we get, the less essential it is to have a center hub for all the connectivity of the church. To me, there's a lot of bonuses on this because it increases connections, because people really have to learn how to communicate directly. There's no intermediary. But just from a financial perspective, it's cheaper to do that than to have 14 phone lines coming into the church, and you don't have to heat these big old Gothic buildings in order to have a secretary sit in an office. You just they take care of that at home. They can put their feet up by the fire as long as they're doing the bulletin, and it's a new world in which we are going. Churches are very frightened of the concept, but I would love to get your thoughts on what I'm ranting about.
Well, that's the way to sell it if you really want to go this direction to your board. Say, hey, look at all the money we can save. So, Antoine, this is right in your wheelhouse.
It is. I've been talking to churches about this for a long time, probably way longer than, definitely longer than I've been doing Mobile Ministry Magazine. Back when I was in grade school, I went to a Catholic school. And, in a Catholic school, you have the parish house, you have the covenant where the nuns are. But one of the things that we always noticed about our parish priest is that he was never home. He was very, very rarely home. And then when he was home, he was either asleep or entertaining guests because he'd been out all day and he wanted to come home instead of be out and about. And so he was already very mobile. And that's in a community, Roman Catholic Church, where you have, this specific idea of a community where people really do have an association to the pastor and the work of the church, beginning from a specific physical space. But that said, as I iterated through my school life, he really was less and less at home. And I've seen the case with a lot of churches that have planted here in Charlotte, that while many of them get an office, you have to have a mailing address in order to qualify parts of that really important 501c3 or whatever other status that you're going to be using for tax reasons. Many of them, they're not in their offices very long. In the office, there's one church here, Elevation, one of the fastest growing churches in the country. And their church office is literally a rented set of like 2 rooms in a business park right outside of Charlotte. There's no office per se. There's no one in the office because the work of the church largely happens well outside of the office. And so it's not impossible for many churches to adopt a model where they're not present at a zip code all the time. I do believe, and this is something I think I learned from you, Wes, while you don't have to be present in an office, the church doesn't have to have its own zip code. The ministers who work in a church need to be available physically. And so having open office hours in a coffee shop or using a co-working space, as some of the churches do here in Matthews, is a really good idea as a way for people to have a place to connect. And then you publish, hey, I got these open office hours. But then when there are no open office hours and you're online, yeah, you are able to utilize the Hangouts and the Skypes, in order to do that kind of connectivity that matters. And if your church content management system is up to snuff, yeah, Betty can go ahead and do the newsletters in her pajamas without leaving the house or while she's getting ready to host midday Bible study at her home versus having to wait to come to the office and travel that way and go back and forth. You turn the church from a social hub to really a church.
Let me ask you a question about, you talked about having office hours. Do you find a lot of people who are doing this that you've talked to, do they use things like Foursquare, Swarm, or Facebook check-in? That way they can say, hey, I'm at the Starbucks, I'll be here till about 4 o'clock today. and then people can show up as they want to and hang out with them.
Yeah, pre-published in the bulletin. You know, this we'll have office hours at XYZ coffee shop from this time to this time. Sometimes it's a shout out on via Facebook or Twitter, Foursquare. It's up to whatever that particular pastor has done to already connect with that community. Those are the channels he or she uses to make themselves available, you know, during that time. The strategy there is to say it often enough that people know about it, and to be at the same place consistent enough that folks can figure out, hey, you know what, if I show up at this coffee shop at 12 o'clock, I know Wes is going to probably be there, if not going to be there real soon unless there's something else going on. I really like to talk to him, so I'll make myself over to that coffee shop. You know.
How does this affect, do you guys think, that drop-in? You know, I could think of just recently in my own ministry, I had a drop-in. Wasn't an appointment. It was just somebody, they saw my car at the church, so they dropped in and said, hey, you know, I need to talk to you about something. And we sat down and we had we sat and talked. We cried together. We prayed together. That wouldn't have happened at a coffee shop.
No, to me, see, my experience is just different. I had in-office hours for the first few years that I was here, and I'm there, and that's what I'm doing, and I'm dressed up to be in the office. And I think I had one person in 4 years drop in, and that was basically to complain about something.
Yeah, I know that's not going to happen a lot, but you know, when it does.
It does, but see, now what I do get drop-ins though, Kevin, my drop-ins are Facebook.
Okay.
Whereas I get people who send me, and the only reason why I have Facebook Messenger is because that's where people know that they can get me there. Pastor West dealing with this, what's going on? Okay, and from there I can set up, well, if you want to get together, we can be here or here, or here's a word from that. I've had people who, they're kids from the church, and they're married, and they're living in California, and they're going through painful things, like they're the other side of the country, but they'll pop in, is this abnormal? No. Let's talk about this. Okay, fine. And that's all they need. And so that's it. But again, see, I'm an introvert. I like that. So the drop-ins are the worst thing that you can do to me, because it drains me almost immediately. So for me, it's very much more functional to be the drop-in in Facebook, and then I'll prepare myself to meet you in person later. But if you're more extroverted, then I can see why having a drop-in is a positive thing.
Well, I guess I'm quasi-introverted, but I also like those on occasion, the drop-ins. I don't mind them late in the morning, And my former church, we had a church secretary, so I was sort of expected to keep church office hours, and the previous pastors at this church really didn't do that a lot. In fact, until they built this building about 15 or 12 years ago, 13 years ago, they didn't even have a pastor's office at the church. But Antoine, what do you think about that? How would you suggest people handle those, those unscheduled discipleship, counseling, ministry, appointment kinds of things that a pastor might regularly have in their church office, that the dynamic of a coffee shop, or at the local Chick-fil-A, which that's kind of my hangout in the morning. I go get a biscuit and sit for 2 hours, and some of my members are there and they see it. And so seriously, how do you handle those? You're going to miss out on those in those very public places.
Well, you have to, as a pastor, you have to have a place, a quiet place, and this is not also for your own sanity, but as a ministry leader, you want to have a quiet place where people can engage you privately and make that known that space is available. When I got here to Charlotte and started doing a lot of mentoring, my quiet place started out as my apartment, and it was between the hours of 6 and 9 p.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If you wanted to drop by, Antoine was always home unless it was a really sunny day. He was on his bicycle. But I was always home. You could always drop by, no problem at all. I'm more than happy to chat with you, and I'd had a few people that came by, and then one of those guys, it became an every Wednesday thing where between 6 and 9 he always wanted to get together. But because that was established as a private place, and in that case for those kind of conversations, it worked out really well. So it's not that so much that having an office is a old thing or a bad thing. Is that as ministers we run into being available and being accessible. I guess I should use those two terms individually. Being available, saying that I have a time or place where you can contact me. And Facebook Messenger, as Wes described it, that's a really good filter, for some of those personal meetings. Not all of us are extroverts and willing to, just say, hey, I'm available immediately. But, being able to say, hey, listen, either online or offline, here is a place and some times that I'm available, and I'm more than happy to answer some questions. If you need a little bit more than that, we can go ahead and schedule some time and either meet at my office or meet at this corner of the library that nobody else gets to, so we can talk about those private things on a regular basis. And
I think that's a good strategy, like you said. Just maybe there are some public places, but also are private. They're just like a very secluded corner of a library, like you said, or something like that. Well, listen, we're coming up on 30 minutes, and Antoine, you didn't get this word because you weren't on as early as we were, but I've got a funeral going here, and people will be starting to show up here in about half an hour for the visitation beforehand. So we're going to have to call this one short. That's why we titled it Quick and Painful. But anyway, actually, I did it quick and painless, but I would love, let me just end this by saying if any of you are watching this, the YouTube video of this later on, we'd love it if you would maybe give a YouTube video response. What do you do if you're a mobile office kind of person? What do you do? How do you handle that? What kind of, maybe there's some apps, or maybe there's some kind of technology used, or maybe it's a very low-tech way that you handle it. So give us a video response on YouTube. We'd love for that, or some comments at the Google Plus page, or wherever you see that. You can always tweet us at Theotek News on Twitter, and we'd really love to interact with you. Next week, we'll be back, hopefully at our regular time, hopefully with all four of us present. LaRosa couldn't make it today, but this has been a great discussion. I really enjoy you guys being here with us, and we're going to sign off for now.
See you later.
Take care.